and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today we're going to talk about one of the top subjects in Hampton that everyone is concerned about, which is tidal flooding and what you can do to minimize your risk. My guest is Gayle Hicks. Welcome, Gayle.
Thank you for having me. I actually really enjoy this program and recommend it highly to everyone.
Really? Thank
Yes,
you. Well, you are water resources engineer, and I know whenever we're at public meetings, I look up and there's like 50 people around you because it is, I mean, flooding issues are so big here, and anecdotally, everyone says it's getting worse, whether that's, you know, a blip or part of a long-term trend. So let's start out by, what do you think the outlook is? People talk about sea level rise. It's real. It
is getting worse. Since 1992, we've actually already experienced in this area about six inches of rise. And
wow,
people,
since 92?
It's a lot, and people see the difference because when you're flat, 6 inches means a lot. It really spreads out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, VIMS is predicting in their tidal flooding study that, or recurring flooding study that they did for the General Assembly a couple of years ago, that by 2040 we might have a total of 1.5 feet. So it is.
Wow.
2040 is around the corner, so we should really be thinking about
it
how
really
we're
is. It
going to
could be
react
in
to
our
that.
lifetimes, right?
That is correct. Well, maybe yours, not mine. I'm very old.
I don't think so. So this is real, and it's worse, actually, what people say, in Hampton roads, because in addition to the water level rising, the land is sinking, which they call subsidence.
Correct.
So we're having this double whammy compared to maybe people on other coasts or other places.
That is correct. And actually, I think there's a move to measure that land sinking. The USGS came out with another report last year that recommended that this area actually determine how much that is, because right now that is combined in with the sea level rise, and it is causing our sea level rise for this area to be viewed upon as accelerating. But it's not actually the sea level rise that's the full contribution, but actually these other factors.
But you know, when there's water flowing, you don't really care what caused it or how it got
That's
there.
correct.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
So you want to educate people, not do things for people or even really advise, but give them the information they need to make decisions.
That is correct. Ever since I've been the floodplain manager, that is my aim. You could say it's fortunate or unfortunate, but when you talk to me, I'm always going to go ahead and tell you something that you didn't know before.
I know it's depressing, Gayle. But it is important that people understand what their options are, because there are some things you can do to, your term is mitigation.
That's correct.
What does that mean?
Mitigation means you're going to take some activities that are either going to minimize or eliminate your loss. And we have a tendency to say, let's go down the resiliency road, because a lot of people, they've got a set situation that they're unable to.
Many of us can't move necessarily.
Right. Many of us can't move, or they may not be able to elevate their house.
Because that's very pricey. And we do have some grant programs and some aid for people who have had repetitive loss, and I'll refer them to emergency management. So we're assuming, though, most people can't afford to do either of those two options.
That's correct. And
or don't want to move. There's a joy to living near the water.
Everybody wants to live on the water. Contrary to what we were thinking, it hasn't affected the real estate market in any way. I read an article about that actually in the past week. So everybody wants to live on the water, and there are a lot of benefits for being on the water, but there are also some other things that we have to deal with. So those people that, a lot of people, their garage, for instance, is slab on grade, which means it's flat, and you have to walk up to your house, maybe as much as 2 feet. So their structure may not be flooding, but their garage may be flooding. And if they keep their washer and dryer out there, for instance, we're saying, why go ahead and be without a washer and dryer? These days, those front-loading washers are very popular.
Yep.
Go ahead and have a carpenter friend of yours build a small platform, actually raise the washer and dryer up out of the floodwaters. You know, you'll know exactly, of course, you're going to call and find out what the base flood elevation is there. So you can go ahead and raise those up high enough so that when you have a flooding event, you're not going to be without a washer and a dryer. So that's called a resiliency.
Or a freezer,
kind of
or whatever
or a
else you might have
freezer,
out
or
there.
a water heater. just getting things up off the floor and storing them above or attached to the sides of your garage.
That sounds kind of basic, but I guess until it happens, you don't think about it. Until you've had experience and had to replace all those things.
One would think it is basic. Some people have figured it out for themselves, and they've come up with some really ingenious ways to either keep the water out of their garage. Some people essentially sandbag their garage, or have come up with a structure. I know someone who did a wrapped pipe that actually put that at the bottom of his garage to keep his garage from flooding. You can also, if your garage has drywall in it, and a lot of garages are finished and do have drywall,
right,
you can actually go ahead and, instead of installing a full sheet of drywall, you can install a partial sheet of drywall so that the bottom portion sort of becomes the sacrificial portion. All you have to do is tear that out. Then you don't have to replace all of the drywall.
Gotcha.
You just have to replace the bottom panel, which has gotten flooded.
So you put a short panel at the bottom,
You put a short
basically.
panel at the bottom.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so there are things that people can do, and I'd like them to be able to know that they can do those things. It helps them, when they're getting ready to have a flooding event, it's very stressful. These are things that they can do that are proactive, that will reduce their stress, and we'd certainly like to do that.
Now, how do people know whether they're in a tidal flooding zone or what their risk is? How can they get that information?
Well, we do have flood maps, and it is now a digital product. So, and it is, the city's flood maps are superimposed over the city's aerial photography. So it's very user-friendly. It is still, nevertheless, a map, and people have difficulty reading maps.
They have a lot of lines and
They have a lot of lines and
hashes,
things.
and it's very complicated.
It's very complicated. I always refer people first to our GIS system, and if they have access to that, and then I'm happy.
And you can't get to a public computer at the library. Someone
That's
will
true.
help you do it.
And then if I have them on the phone and they're sitting at their computer, I can talk them through that so that they can learn how to use that and become comfortable with it. And of course, I call that high school. You have to master that before you ever venture to the FEMA website. The FEMA website is
I got lost, and
very,
I had
very
trouble.
difficult.
I had a lot of trouble with that.
It's not user-friendly.
Now, one of the things, when I got to the GIS, there were a lot of abbreviations that I didn't understand. AE and AZ and VE, and where can you learn all of those things?
That's actually on the legend portion, which is something that you can view. What we have to be careful about, or what we're concerned about right now, are those properties that are in the floodplain, and those are the VE properties and the AE properties.
Okay, so if it says VE or
AE, you're in it.
You're in it, okay. And in the floodplain means you have a, what is it, 100
They say
year?
it's the 100-year flood,
Okay.
or
so
the
once
1%
every 100
annual
years,
chance.
or 1% chance per year.
Although we know that's
of tidal
statistical,
flooding.
and so we can have many of those
Sure,
storms
sure.
in one single year, and unfortunately we have in the past. This year we've been lucky, we haven't had any nor'easters.
But in the long run, 1% chance a year doesn't mean if it happened this year, it won't happen again for another 99
It can easily
years.
happen multiple times.
And
very
especially
often,
if that change is occurring, what was the 100-year floodplain a year ago?
that
might be
level may
bigger.
have changed.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. So now I've looked at the map and I found out that let's say I'm in there.
Yes.
What do I do?
Well, we do encourage people. We don't sell insurance, and we don't talk really insurance. We just give them basic information about that. And we do encourage people to get flood insurance. Very often, it's not an option.
I was going to say, if
Yeah.
I have a loan on my house, which most of us do.
If you have a loan, you are going to be required to get flood insurance. Not only
that lender wants to make sure they get their money. They're not so worried about you getting your money.
well, it's their risk, and
Right.
so because it's their risk and they're lending the money, they can make the rules. And generally what's going to happen is, even if your house may be on a high spot in your yard, if there is floodplain that is actually touching your property lines, they're going to require that you get flood
really?
insurance.
Okay.
So what people need to remember is flood insurance is priced by utilizing something called a flood elevation certificate. That is something that is provided by a surveyor or an engineer. It's signed and sealed, and there's a lot of information on it. That information is entered into a program that is FEMA's program that allows the agent to price that policy. So right off the bat, if someone says, I'm going to get you a policy, and they don't ask for a flood elevation certificate, they're going to base that cost of that policy on the worst case scenario. You don't want that. You can't afford that. You ought to be able to get a policy that's actually based on your risk. And I always encourage people not to get insurance through their lender, because their aim is to get you insurance as quickly as possible. You can go ahead, if insurance is required, and go on floodsmart.gov, find a local agent in your area, and go to a local agent and talk to them about it. You can have a one-on-one relationship with them. That gives you an opportunity to ask questions and get information. And that's what people should do. They should get their own policy and not allow their lender to dictate which policy they're going to buy.
And now, one of the things that the city has done, largely through your work, is a series of educational efforts and mitigation efforts that has given Hampton residents a discount in that flood insurance.
That's correct. You're on our outreach committee, and I appreciate that.
A little plug in there.
Yes, that's right. And that's called the Community Rating System, and we entered it in May of 2011 as an 8. And I had someone call up and say, I don't understand, we're only an 8, why aren't we a 1? There aren't very many communities in the entire United States that are 1. It's very difficult. It's a point system based on the program that you have. Steve Shapiro and Community Development took the lead on this. He wanted to get credit for the things that we were already doing.
Right, that's important.
That is important. So for every step, it's a 5% decrease in your insurance premium. That becomes extremely important because we know insurance premiums are rising.
Right, because it is so expensive and because floods are occurring more often and the federal government no longer wants to bear the full cost. They want policyholders to pay more of it, which is going to impact coastal communities like Hampton in a huge, huge way.
It is, and that's why the original Insurance Reform Act was the Biggert Waters 2012, and Congress
they may be backing away from some of that a little bit.
Exactly. They're starting to back away from some of that because they realize that it's the affordability issue wasn't studied, and it needed to be. And they realize people are not ready to absorb these large increases in premiums in a short period of time.
Okay, now Gayle, sitting here talking to you, this all makes way more sense than when I try to go online and read some of the government type publications or look at a map by myself. You guys are having an event at which you and other people will help folks like me understand this whole complicated issue.
We're hoping that it is something that people can use. It was recommended by the Tidal Flooding Subcommittee of the Hampton Waterway Steering Committee. They wanted a product that was user-friendly, and they wanted a lot of different kinds of things, so it's a 3-part product. And really, the reason why we're having the outreach is we want people to look at it and comment on it. We want it to be something that they can easily use and easily understand. So the whole purpose of having the outreach, well, of course, it's going to be a CRS activity, community rating system.
It's going to help with your flood insurance rates.
It's going to help with your flood insurance rates. But it's also a chance for you to look at what we've developed so far to determine, is that something that you can use? Is it too complicated to use? Does it have to be simpler?
So you're looking at, you're going to give people kind of an at-a-glance brochure. If they want it, they can take a look at much more complicated and detailed reports.
That's correct.
And you're going to get some feedback from them, too, on how we can make this more understandable, more user-friendly, or maybe some people want more details than
That's right. People could want more, they could want less, they could want it to look differently. We won't know, because when the Tidal Flooding Subcommittee actually thought of this, and they actually did. The staff and our consultant.
And this is a committee of citizens, not all engineers like you.
We sat in the room and we listened to them talk. They spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would be helpful for them, and they came up with this concept. And it's easy to think it's going to be helpful, but until you see it, it might not be as helpful as you thought it was going to be. So this is a big unveiling. It's not set in stone. We want it to be a product that they can actually use.
Okay. So where and when is this event?
Going to be March the 27th. It's going to be at the Convention Center in the AB ballrooms from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll also have...
Now, is this a thing where people need to sit and listen for 2 hours, or do they walk around, they can come and go?
They're going to listen for a little bit. We're actually going to do a little poll to see how much they do know. And then they will listen to a presentation that describes the 3 different deliverables, essentially, that we're getting. After that, we're going to break into 4 groups. They're based on neighborhoods that are, conglomerated with other neighborhoods, but in similar areas.
Okay.
So they share similar types of flooding situations. For like the New Market Creek those folks have a very distinct kind of flooding that they experience. And then along with, in downtown Hampton is an area, Grandview and Fox Hill is another area, also Phoebus, Buckrow is another area. So they're going to be breaking out into groups in those areas. We're going to give them a larger map that shows a inset of some maps that we're going to give them. We're going to have them look at the maps, and they're going to comment on that product, plus all the other things that they were told during the original presentation. This gives them an opportunity. We'll have a staff support there at each one, plus a recorder, and we're going to record that information, take that information back, and determine what we can do to make the product better.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gayle. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
It's still an intimidating and huge topic, but I think the more we learn about our risks, the more we learn about flooding and what we can do to minimize the damage or prevent it, the easier we can deal with the situation when it happens. Thank you for watching.